As we heard in the video, disconnection from country, spirituality, and cultural practices, from family and kinship systems, and the loss of parenting practices are some of the sources of trauma encountered by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that can be passed on from caregiver to child. In intergenerational trauma, the first generation are the survivors who the trauma directly impacted. This may be the people who were taken from their land or the children who were taken from their family and culture. The trauma of these events has long been neglected and left unmanaged, which in some cases leads to invisible wounds being passed on. The passing on of this trauma may take a variety of forms, including through parenting practices, behavioural problems, violence, harmful substance use, and mental health issues. The second generation are the descendants from the survivors. They see the hurt their parents have endured, they hear their stories and see the impacts of mental health conditions, substance abuse, and domestic violence. It is this generation who either become aware of generational trauma and seek help and support to change their story, or unconsciously repeats the generational trauma due to following their parents' or community's example. The unconscious nature of this comes from a child's attachment to their surroundings when they are growing up. They learn social norms from a young age. If their parents are distant, they may have distance in their relationships. If they experience violence and substance abuse, they may see this as normal and follow these examples without questioning, and so this is passed to the next generation. The third generation, again, is highly influenced by their surroundings in their childhood and developmental years. Those whose parents have sought support are more likely to choose healthy relationships, have higher self-worth, live a healthy life, have less mental health issues, and an overall higher satisfaction with life. Those whose parents have not sought support and unconsciously repeats the trauma patterns face complicated issues in most aspects of life. They may reenact the trauma patterns that have no connection with present life situations and may end up with potentially absent or abusive partners. Research shows that people who experience trauma are more likely to engage in self-destructive behaviours, develop lifestyle diseases, and enter and remain in the criminal justice system. Higher rates of poor physical and mental health, addiction, incarceration, domestic violence, self-harm and suicide in Indigenous communities are directly linked to experiences of trauma. These issues are both results of historical trauma and new instances of trauma, which together can lead to a vicious cycle in Indigenous communities. Trauma is not limited to the effects of colonisation and stolen generations. It is intensified by exposure to other stresses such as institutional and cultural racism and socio-economic marginalisation. All of these factors interrupt healthy and protective connections to family, kin, and community. Intergenerational trauma is classed more generally as complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So keeping the impacts of intergenerational trauma in mind that we saw in the video, what are some of the potential impacts for our campers who attend camp? Intergenerational trauma shares the characteristics of PTSD, such as re-experiencing the trauma through intrusive memories, flashbacks, and nightmares, avoiding people, places, or thoughts that remind them of trauma, changes in mood and thinking, including feeling distant from other people and having overwhelming negative emotions, or feeling on edge and becoming irritable, easily frightened, or having difficulty concentrating or sleeping. In addition to these symptoms, a person who experiences intergenerational trauma will also have symptoms of negative self-concept, emotional dysregulation, and interpersonal difficulties. So let's break this down further. This image shows the interconnectedness of self-identity for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. A sense of self is important in all cultures. However, in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, a sense of self includes identity, connection to culture, and to country. Therefore, a negative self-concept can cause increased feelings of shame and increased labels being passed on through the generations. Intergenerational trauma can cause a person to view themselves in a negative light. They may feel helpless, hopeless, guilty, or ashamed. They may experience loss of meaning, including losing one's core beliefs, values, or hope in the world and other people. And problems with self-esteem, leading to feelings of worthlessness and blaming themselves for their trauma. They may believe that bad things happen because of something inside of them. Emotional dysregulation refers to the inability of a person to control or regulate their emotional responses. This may include difficulty controlling emotions, which may lead to somebody losing control over them. This can manifest as explosive anger, persistent sadness, depression, and suicidal thoughts. They may feel like they are living in a dream or have trouble feeling happy. They may also experience feelings of detachment, whereby a person may disconnect from themselves and the world around them. Relationships may suffer due to difficulties trusting others and a negative self view. A person experiencing the effects of intergenerational trauma may avoid relationships or develop unhealthy relationships because that is what they knew in the past. Children may experience difficulties with attachment due to disconnection from their extended families and culture and high levels of stress from family and the community members who are dealing with impacts of trauma. These experiences may lead to developmental issues for children who are particularly susceptible to distress at a young age. This creates a cycle of trauma where the impact is passed from one generation to the next. We have focused on the social and emotional impacts of trauma. However, it is important to note there are so many physical responses to trauma also, which cannot be overlooked. However, we won't be covering these during this session, but it is good to be aware that they are also present. It is important to remember that while there may be some differences between our cultures, we are all children of God and we are all different. We will touch on a couple of considerations when coming to Darwin Camp, which may be a bit different to other camps or other times you have worked with kids. It is great for us to keep this in mind. However, not all of these will be applicable to all our campers. It just helps lay a little bit of a foundation to build upon. Respect of people who are older, leaders, and providing guidance is so important in Aboriginal culture. Many of our campers will identify us as volunteers on camp as people who require respect. Some behaviours that they may display to show respect include not making eye contact when being spoken to or when they are speaking, often addressing adults as Miss or Mr. rather than using our names, even when we're all wearing name tags. Don't expect campers to ask for help or ask questions. Often asking questions, particularly in front of others, would bring shame within Aboriginal culture. It is our role to watch body language and facial expression to help us understand if the right message is being conveyed to our campers. Communication within Aboriginal culture often takes a roundabout style, which may often be perceived as talking around the issue. Therefore, it is important for us to think a bit more broadly and read into the spoken word a little more. For example, a camper may say, "I'm thirsty," rather than, "May I please have some water?" Nonverbal communication often speaks louder than verbal. Actions, facial expressions, and words are all important forms of communication within Aboriginal culture. Silence can mean a number of different things, including maybe they're thinking hard to understand. They may not know the person well enough to answer, or maybe they're saying no in a polite way. To show respect, we need to be mindful of our tone and pace when talking to our campers. This is particularly important when meeting them for the first time and in the first couple of days of camp when everything and everyone is new. Talk slow and soft when talking to new people or about new things. This can show respect to the camper and help build rapport to set you up for a fantastic week. And although it goes against most of what we feel, don't expect please and thank you. Absolutely encourage manners. However, this links back to the roundabout communication style where language is often indirect. When chatting to campers, be curious to get to know them more. Ask, "What mob are you from?" and be interested in their story. Know what country you live on. For some of us, this won't be in the Northern Territory, but this is a way to connect and show interest in Aboriginal culture. But be mindful of your language. For example, in Creole, a local language group in the top end, cheeky actually has a meaning of dangerous or harmful. A great word to use is deadly. For example, you have some deadly volleyball skills and watch the camper's face light up. Deadly means awesome or great, and the kids just love it. Some more broad overarching points to be aware of include being aware of the role Christians have played in Australia's history, like we have discussed. Some of the campers may be wary of this after being told various stories. However, this has not been an issue on previous camps. Avoid generalisations regarding Aboriginal culture and being aware that time may be more fluid with little regard to sticking to the schedule. Ways you can help with this is by preparing for transitions early. For example, in 5 minutes we're going to rock climbing, even if it may be closer to 7 to 10 minutes before the activity is due to start. We have covered some pretty full-on content in this training, but please don't get overwhelmed. Camp is so much fun. It's great to be aware of the potential cultural difference at Southern Cross Kids Camp Darwin, but come with your own curiosity, and I guarantee you will learn something. For me, on my first Darwin camp, my camper taught me all about what plants I could eat, and my second Darwin camp taught me about how important a sense of community is. But most importantly, as with all Southern Cross Kids camps, we are not here to fix the camper. We are here to show unconditional love and deliver hope to these amazing kids.